About Afghanistan, there was a briefing this week on the Hill, as you know, and some criticism afterwards. There is a Senate Republican report that Senator Risch put out, which is broadly critical of the evacuation and the planning. Let me posit that you successfully evacuated 120,000 people after the fall of Kabul, which is an extraordinary number. So I'm putting that out there, okay? But we've since seen the George Packer reporting in the Atlantic, as well as the Axios deputies' notes from an August 14th deputies meeting at the White House, which is the day, only hours before Kabul fell that night. So let me ask you about, how late the planning was done, because from quotes from that memo, which no one has denied, the planning was just starting to get Afghan translators out, local embassy personnel out, highly vulnerable Afghan civil society leaders, the document reads in part. Embassy Kabul will notify LES, locally employed staff, to begin to register their interest in relocation to the United States and begin to prepare immediately for departure. Well, we know that locally employed staff were not notified when the embassy shut down and the other staff were evacuated. Kabul fell that very night. Why wasn't that done sooner as well? Another quote, all departments and agencies will transmit their priority populations to be considered for relocation as P1/P2 referrals. That's very early on, at the very last moment. And the question is, with the planning, with the deadline approaching from the spring on, why wasn't there, despite the COVID outbreak in Kabul embassy, why wasn't there more planning, outsourcing some of that paperwork for SIVs, P1 and P2s? Why weren't P1 and P2 categories established earlier? Why was it done so close to when it was impossible to get these others out, many of whom are still there?
Okay, so there's a lot in that question. There's a lot in that report that we would take issue with. Let me start by saying that no single document, I'm not going to speak to the specifics of a purportedly leaked document, but no single document is reflective of the totality of months and months of work and planning on any issue.
I'm sorry, but it says begin to query the population of locally employed staff. It doesn't say we've been doing this. All of these quotes refer to initiating the planning.
So that is not an accurate rendition of what happened.
These are quotes. And no one has denied the legitimacy.
Let me give you some context as to what did happen. And in order to do that, you really have to back up to January of last year. We, as you know, and I think you alluded to,
you inherited nothing.
We inherited. You said nothing, but yes, it was a program, an SIV program that had been, in many ways, intentionally starved. It was a program that was basically at a standstill. It was a program that had not conducted a single interview in Kabul since March of the previous year, March of 2020. After taking office, we surged resources and staff in order to issue nearly 8,400 SIVs in the first year of this administration. And since August 30th, since the end of the U.S. military mission, we have brought about 3,500 U.S. citizens, lawful permanent residents, and SIV holders and their immediate families out of Afghanistan. We are prepared to bring out thousands more this year as operational and security conditions permit in collaboration with our partners. You also referenced this, but of the 124,000 individuals, these were U.S. citizens, these were Afghans, these are other foreign nationals that we successfully evacuated and relocated out of Afghanistan. More than 76,000 Afghans have already arrived in the United States to be resettled. We, of course, as you heard me say before, continue to work expeditiously to bring more Afghans out and to welcome more of our Afghan allies and their families to their new lives here in the United States. When the last administration freed thousands of Taliban fighters, undermined the Afghan government, withdrew troops with no plan as to what to do next, and dismantled our refugee programs and starved, in some ways, this SIV program, I don't recall hearing much criticism of that. When we took office, as I alluded to, we got to work rebuilding the refugee resettlement program that had been starved of resources, to revitalize the SIV program that had gone some 300 days without a single interview in Kabul. And we began contingency planning for a number of scenarios. It was not by accident, Andrea, that we were able to evacuate these 124,000 individuals from Kabul in the span of a couple weeks in August, including the tens of thousands of Afghans, not to mention our own citizens, lawful permanent residents, and third country nationals. To give you a broader context beyond this raw number, by mid-August of last year, we had accelerated SIV processing starting early in the Biden administration. March of 2021, we were doing about 100. We were processing about 100 SIVs per week. By August, some 6 or so months later, it was 1,000, and I think that gives you a flavor of the resources and the resources we surged and the priority we attached to it.
Do you think that's enough?
Andrea, we would always like to do more, but as you know, this is a statutorily defined, meaning defined by Congress, program that has 14 laborious steps, 14 steps that are time-consuming, and it is a program that was never designed to take place in the context of an evacuation. So of course, we would like to accelerate that further. But we've always had to operate within the statutorily defined, that is to say, congressionally mandated requirements. Second, we pre-positioned military assets that ultimately allowed us to secure and operate Kabul's airport and facilitate these 100,000, 120,000 plus evacuations by August 31st. We did so under extraordinarily challenging circumstances. Third, and this is something where this building took the lead, we swiftly and nimbly built a network of almost 24 locations around the world that hosted tens of thousands of Afghan guests while we ensured that they were appropriately vetted and that they did not and would not pose a threat to American communities before they were resettled in the United States. In the early summer, before all of this, before the evacuation, we launched Operation Allies Refuge, and we worked with Congress to pass legislation that gave us much needed authorities to quickly relocate our Afghan allies. So we did all of this. Of the 120,000 individuals, about 10,000 were U.S. citizens, lawful permanent residents, and SIV holders. In September and August, we built the capacity and have since welcomed the tens of thousands of Afghan refugees to their new homes. None of this happened by accident. None of this would have happened if, as certain documents, certain reports suggest, this all started in August or this all took place in the summer.
So why was the memo written that way if they weren't being launched as of this
I can't speak to why one memo of presumably thousands and thousands of documents that this administration produced on Afghanistan in our first 7 months in office.
It was one memo on the day Kabul fell. It's a deputies meeting at the White House in the sit room.
Andrea, again, I'm not in a position to comment on a specific leaked document, but no document can tell the full comprehensive story of what we did, what we were able to do. And what I've just done is try and give you a flavor of that. There's much more that we can go through to talk about how it was that we were able to evacuate 124,000 individuals, take them to third countries, vet them to ensure that they were appropriate for resettlement here in the United States, bring them to the United States process them upon landing in the United States, place them on military bases in some cases for final stages of medical screening, work with refugee resettlement agencies, and finally welcome these new guests, our new neighbors, to their communities here in the United States. None of this would have happened were this last minute, as whether it is a single document or a single report might suggest.
I'm sorry, somewhere near the halfway point of that forest of an answer that you just gave, you said you don't recall much criticism of the previous administration. Really? Are you serious?
I am.
You don't recall much criticism of the previous administration's policies, foreign policies in general, but specifically on Afghanistan? Ned, my God, you were one of the people who was criticizing the administration. Where do you get this from?
Matt, I'll make the point that this report emanated from the minority SFRC. I'm not sure that we heard criticism of that approach during the last administration.
Oh. This memo came from the NSC, I thought.
SFRC.
The Rish,
Yeah.
the Senate report, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Oh,
He did
no,
not
but the
remember.
memo that she's talking about was an NSC.
No, the question was about a congressional report.
No,
Yes.
I question both.
Both, right? Okay, can I ask a completely unrelated question?
Okay.
The secretary, has he already met with de Mistura, or is that?
It's this afternoon.
Okay, well, in terms of Western Sahara, I just want to know, I presume that the policy has not changed, everything is the same, but I just want to ask specifically about the consulate, and the plans that the previous administration had to open a consulate in Western Sahara, and if those plans are proceeding, or is that something that is not being talked about with?
Matt, we're consulting with the parties on the best way forward. I don't have anything to add.
So is it basically it's still on hold?
We are
kind of?
consulting with the parties on the best way forward.